The transport ship landed with a soft thud on the gray landing pad. Steam rose from its engines. As they cooled down, Dr. Amanda Collins looked out the small window and saw the biggest building she had ever seen in her life. The Zephyrian Institute of Advanced Sciences stretched across the horizon like a metal mountain. Tall spires twisted up into the purple sky, and strange lights blinked all over its surface. "Wow, Mom, look at that." Katie Collins pressed her small face against the window. Her breath made a foggy circle on the glass. At 8 years old, she had never seen anything so amazing. The building looked like something from her favorite space movies. But this was real. Amanda smiled at her daughter's excitement. She was nervous about bringing Katie to this place, but she had no choice. The cultural exchange program was too important to miss, and there was no one back on Earth to watch her daughter. "Stay close to me when we get out," Amanda said. "Remember what we talked about on the ship. The aliens here might look different from us, but they are very smart and friendly." Katie nodded, but she was not really listening. She was too busy staring at the strange creatures walking around outside. Some had 4 arms, some had tentacles instead of legs, and others looked like walking trees with eyes. The ship's door opened with a hiss. Warm air rushed in, carrying strange smells that reminded Katie of her grandmother's spice cabinet mixed with ocean water. They walked down the ramp and onto the landing pad. Professor Vextera was waiting for them. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with smooth blue skin that shimmered like water. His 4 arms moved constantly as he spoke, and his large compound eyes caught every detail around him. When he saw the humans approaching, he made a sound that the translator device turned into polite words. "Welcome to our institute, Dr. Collins," Professor Vextera said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in the translator. "We are honored to have a human scientist visit our research facility. Your species shows much promise, despite being relatively new to galactic society." Amanda shook one of his 4 hands. It felt cool and slightly rough, like touching a lizard. "Thank you for having us, Professor. I'm excited to learn about your research methods." The professor's eyes moved down to look at Katie, who was staring up at him with wide eyes. She had never seen anything like him before, but she was not scared. She was curious. "And this must be your offspring," Professor Vextera said. "How interesting. Human young ones are much smaller than I expected. Is she capable of basic reasoning yet?" Katie frowned. She did not like being talked about like she was not there. "I can think just fine, thank you," she said firmly. The professor's eyes widened in surprise. He had not expected the small human to speak so clearly. "Fascinating. Your young develop language skills quite early. Most species in the galaxy do not achieve complex communication until they are much older." As they walked through the huge entrance hall, Katie kept looking around at everything. The walls were covered with moving pictures that showed math problems and star charts. Strange symbols floated in the air, changing colors as they moved. Other alien students walked past them, carrying books that glowed and whispering in languages her translator could not understand. "Our institute houses the finest minds from 17 different worlds," Professor Vextera explained as they walked. "We study the most complex problems in mathematics, physics, and cognitive science. Our puzzle matrices, for example, can challenge even the most advanced graduate students." Katie saw a group of tall, thin aliens with purple skin gathered around a large glowing table. They were moving their long fingers through the air, and colored shapes appeared and disappeared. They looked frustrated and kept making clicking sounds. "What are they doing?" Katie asked. "They are attempting to solve a spatial reasoning puzzle," the professor said. "It requires understanding patterns in 11 dimensions. Very difficult work. Most students need months of preparation before they can even attempt such problems." Katie watched the purple alien struggle with the floating shapes. To her, it looked like they were making it much harder than it needed to be. The patterns reminded her of the puzzle games she played on her tablet back home. Professor Vextera led them to a smaller building where the human delegation would stay. "Tomorrow, Dr. Collins, you will meet with our research teams. We are very interested in learning about human methods of investigation. Perhaps your species can offer some new perspectives on old problems." As they settled into their rooms, Katie looked out her window at the alien students still working on their puzzles. She wondered why they made it look so difficult when the answers seemed so obvious to her. The next morning came quickly. Katie woke up to strange sounds outside her window. She looked out and saw flying vehicles moving between the tall buildings like colorful fish swimming through the air. The purple sky was getting lighter, which meant it was time for breakfast. Dr. Amanda Collins was already awake, reading reports on her tablet. She looked nervous about the day ahead. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you ready for today's tour?" Katie nodded and ate the strange but tasty fruit that the aliens had provided for breakfast. It tasted like apples mixed with strawberries. "Will I get to see more of those puzzle things today?" "Maybe," Amanda said. "But remember, you need to stay quiet when the grown-ups are talking about important work." They met Professor Vextera in the main hall. Today he was wearing what looked like a shiny lab coat with 4 sleeves. His compound eyes seemed more excited than yesterday. "Good morning, Dr. Collins," he said, his 4 arms moving as he spoke. "Today I have arranged something special. I will demonstrate our most advanced cognitive assessment tools to your human delegation. It will show the impressive mental abilities that our students develop through proper education." They walked through long hallways filled with floating screens and humming machines. Other professors joined them along the way. Katie noticed that they all looked different from each other. Some had scales, some had fur, and others had skin that changed colors as they moved. Professor Vextera led them into a huge round room with a high ceiling. In the center was a platform with a large machine that projected colorful lights into the air. Chairs were arranged in circles around the platform, and many alien professors were already sitting and waiting. "Welcome, colleagues," Professor Vextera announced to the gathered crowd. "Today we will observe how different species approach complex problem-solving. Our human guests will witness the advanced cognitive abilities that proper galactic education can achieve." Katie sat next to her mother in the front row. She swung her legs back and forth because the chair was too big for her. The alien professors behind them whispered to each other in their strange languages. Katie heard the translator making soft beeping sounds as it tried to understand their words. Professor Vextera stepped onto the platform and pressed several buttons on a control panel. The machine above them came to life with a low humming sound. Suddenly, the air filled with floating shapes made of light. Cubes, spheres, and triangles appeared and disappeared in complex patterns. "This is our quantum geometric puzzle matrix," the professor explained proudly. "It tests the ability to manipulate patterns in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Watch as I demonstrate the first level." He reached up with all 4 of his arms and began touching the floating shapes. When he touched them, they changed colors and moved to different positions. It looked very complicated, and it took him several minutes to arrange the shapes into what looked like a flower made of light. The alien professors made impressed sounds and clapped with their various hands, claws, and tentacles. Professor Vextera looked very pleased with himself. "This first level typically takes our beginning students 3 weeks to master," he said. "The patterns require understanding mathematical relationships that most species cannot grasp without years of training." Katie watched the light flower floating in the air. She tilted her head to one side, then the other. The pattern looked familiar to her, like the designs her mother made when she folded paper napkins at dinner parties. "Now I will activate the second level," Professor Vextera announced. "This level challenges even our advanced graduate students. Some never master it all." The light flower dissolved, and new shapes appeared. These were more complex, with edges that seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at. Professor Vextera reached up again, but this time he moved much more slowly and carefully. Katie noticed that her mother was taking notes on her tablet. The other human scientists in their group were whispering to each other and pointing at the floating shapes. They looked confused and impressed at the same time. "Fascinating cognitive architecture," one of the human scientists said quietly. "The spatial reasoning required must be enormous." While the adults watched Professor Vextera work on the puzzle, Katie got bored. She stood up and walked closer to the platform to get a better look. The shapes were pretty, and they reminded her of the kaleidoscope her grandfather had given her for her birthday. "Katie, come back here," her mother whispered, but Katie was already standing right next to the control panel. Professor Vextera was still working on arranging the floating shapes. Sweat was forming on his blue skin, and his forearms were moving more frantically. The other professors were watching him with great interest, making notes and discussing the complexity of the puzzle among themselves. Katie looked up at the twisting shapes above her head. She could see the pattern now, clear as anything. It was just like the tile games on her tablet, only fancier. She wondered why the professor was making it so hard for himself when the solution was right there, obvious as the nose on her face. Katie stood on her tiptoes to see the control panel better. The buttons were glowing with soft blue light, and strange symbols moved across the screen like dancing letters. Professor Vexterot was still struggling with the floating shapes above them, his forearms moving in careful, precise motions. The key is to understand the mathematical relationship between each dimensional plane, the professor explained to his audience while he worked. His voice sounded strained, and drops of sweat rolled down his blue skin. One must calculate the quantum alignment vectors before attempting any manipulation. Katie looked up at the twisting shapes again. She could see exactly where each piece needed to go. It was like looking at a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces were floating in the wrong places. Without really thinking about it, she reached up and touched one of the glowing triangles. The triangle immediately moved to where she thought it should go. Katie smiled and touched another shape, then another. Within seconds, all the floating pieces had arranged themselves into a perfect crystal-like pattern that sparkled and hummed with pleasant music. The room went completely silent. Professor Vexterot's forearms froze in midair. His compound eyes blinked rapidly as he stared at the completed puzzle floating above Katie's head. The other alien professors stopped talking and leaned forward in their chairs. "What just happened?" Dr. Amanda Collins whispered from her seat. Professor Vexterot looked down at Katie, then up at the solved puzzle, then down at Katie again. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Finally, he managed to speak. "There must be a malfunction in the system," he said, his voice shaky. "This puzzle requires advanced mathematical training. It is impossible for an untrained individual to solve it so quickly." He pressed several buttons on the control panel, and the beautiful crystal pattern disappeared. New shapes appeared in its place, even more complex than before. These shapes seemed to fold in on themselves, creating patterns that made Katie's eyes water when she looked at them too directly. "This is a Level 3 puzzle," Professor Vexterot announced to the room. "Only our most advanced doctoral students can attempt this. It typically takes them several hours to complete, if they can complete it at all." Katie squinted at the new shapes. These were trickier, but she could still see the pattern. It reminded her of the time she had watched her mother fold origami cranes, except the folds were happening in directions that did not exist in the real world. She reached up again and touched the floating shapes. This time she worked a little more carefully, moving each piece to where it belonged. The shapes flowed together like water, forming a spinning sculpture that looked like a flower blooming in fast motion. The completed puzzle played a different song, more complex and beautiful than the first one. The melody echoed to the demonstration hall, while everyone stared in complete silence. Professor Vexterot's legs started shaking, and he had to grab the edge of the control panel to steady himself. His compound eyes were so wide that Katie could see her own reflection in them dozens of times. "This is not possible," he whispered. "The cognitive processing required, the dimensional calculations, no organic mind can—" But Katie was not finished. She looked at the control panel and saw more buttons glowing. Without asking permission, she pressed one of them. A new set of shapes appeared, these ones even stranger than the others. They seemed to exist in several places at once, shifting and changing as she watched them. "Level 4, one of the alien professors said in a voice full of awe. "No student has ever solved a Level 4 puzzle. We use them only for theoretical research." Katie tilted her head and studied the impossible shapes. These were definitely the hardest ones yet, but she could still see the pattern underneath all the confusion. It was like looking at a really complicated maze, except the walls kept moving. She began touching the shapes, moving them into position. This time it took her almost 15 seconds to complete the puzzle. When she finished, the result was so beautiful that several of the alien professors gasped out loud. The shapes had formed a geometric pattern that seemed to contain entire galaxies of stars, all spinning and twinkling in perfect harmony. "Mama, look." Katie called her mother excitedly. "It's like a snow globe with stars inside." Dr. Amanda Collins was staring at her daughter with her mouth hanging open. The other human scientists were frantically taking notes and whispering to each other in amazement. Professor Vextera sank down into the nearest chair, all four of his arms hanging limply at his sides. His entire worldview was crumbling around him like a house made of cards in a strong wind. 47 years, he muttered to himself. 47 years I have been working on these puzzles. My greatest students struggle with level 2. My colleagues respect me for reaching level 3. And this small human child. Katie looked around the room at all the staring alien faces. She suddenly realized that everyone was looking at her, and she felt a little embarrassed. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. "I can put them back the way they were if you want." Dr. Amanda Collins jumped up from her chair and rushed to her daughter's side. Her heart was beating fast, and she felt dizzy from what she had just seen. All around the room, alien professors were talking loudly in their strange languages, pointing at Katie and making excited gestures. "Katie, honey, what did you just do?" Amanda asked, kneeling down to her daughter's eye level. Katie shrugged her small shoulders. "I just moved the pretty shapes where they needed to go. Like the puzzle games on my tablet at home, remember? The ones where you match the colors and patterns." Professor Vexera was still sitting in his chair, staring at the completed level 4 puzzle floating above them. The beautiful star-filled pattern continued to spin slowly, playing its complex melody. He shook his head back and forth like he was trying to wake up from a strange dream. "This cannot be real," he muttered. "The computational requirements alone, the pattern recognition algorithms. It should take quantum computers hours to calculate these solutions." A tall alien with silver skin and 6 eyes approached the group. She moved with quick, jerky motions like a bird. "Professor Vextera, may I examine this phenomenon more closely? I am Dr. Krill from the Cognitive Research Department." Professor Vextera nodded weakly and waved one of his hands toward Katie. "Please, by all means. I clearly do not understand what is happening here." Dr. Krill crouched down in front of Katie, her 6 eyes blinking one at a time in a rolling pattern. "Young human, can you explain to me how you solve these puzzles? What process did you use in your mind?" Katie thought for a moment, chewing on her lower lip the way she always did when she was concentrating. "Well, I just looked at the shapes and I could see where they wanted to go. Like when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle and you can tell which piece fits in the empty spot just by looking at it. But these are not simple jigsaw puzzles," Dr. Krill said gently. "These patterns exist in multiple dimensions. They require understanding complex mathematical relationships." "I don't know about math stuff," Katie said honestly. "I just see the patterns. Like that triangle they want to connect with that circle over there. And when they connected, it made a path for the squiggly line to follow. It's like they're all friends and they want to hold hands in the right way." Dr. Krill's 6 eyes widened. She looked up at Amanda. "Dr. Collins, has your daughter received any advanced training in spatial mathematics or dimensional theory?" Amanda laughed, but it sounded nervous. "No, not at all. She's 8 years old. She goes to regular elementary school and plays with regular kid toys. Her favorite activities are drawing pictures and playing simple computer games." "Remarkable," Dr. Krill whispered. She turned back to Katie. "Young one, would you be willing to try more puzzles? I would like to understand better how your mind works." Katie nodded eagerly. She was having more fun than she had had in weeks. "Can I try the really hard ones? These are starting to get easy." Professor Vextera made a choking sound. "Easy?" She said they are getting easy. Dr. Krill pressed more buttons on the control panel. New shapes appeared in the air, but these were different from the others. They seemed to flicker in and out of existence, and some of them appeared to be made of pure light that hurt to look at directly. "This is a level 6 puzzle," Dr. Krill announced to the room. "We have never seen anyone complete a level 6 puzzle. We created them purely for theoretical research purposes." Katie studied the flickering shapes carefully. These were definitely the hardest ones yet. She had to squint and turn her head sideways to see the pattern clearly. It was like trying to see a picture hidden in one of those magic eye books her aunt had shown her. "Oh, I see it now," Katie said suddenly. "It's like a dance. The shapes are dancing with each other, but they're dancing to different songs at the same time. I just need to help them find the right rhythm." She began touching the flickering shapes, and they responded to her touch by becoming more solid and bright. As she moved them into position, they started to dance together in a synchronized pattern that was so beautiful it made several of the alien professors gasp and cover their eyes. When Katie finished, the completed puzzle looked like a living constellation that told a story about the birth and death of stars. The music it played was so complex and moving that some of the aliens in the audience started crying tears of joy. The room was completely silent except for the puzzle's ethereal music. Then, slowly, one of the alien professors started clapping. Soon, all of them were applauding with whatever appendages they had, creating a thunderous sound that echoed to the demonstration hall. Katie smiled and took a little bow, the way her dance teacher had taught her to do after her recitals. She did not fully understand why everyone was so excited, but she was happy that she had made them happy. Professor Vexter finally stood up from his chair on shaky legs. He walked over to Katie and knelt down in front of her, bringing his compound eyes level with her face. "Little one," he said in a voice full of wonder, "you have just accomplished something that our greatest minds believed was impossible. How do you do it? What do you see that we cannot see?" News of Katie's amazing puzzle-solving spread to the Institute like wildfire. Within an hour, scientists from every department were talking about the little human girl who could solve impossible problems in seconds. By lunchtime, alien professors were arriving from other buildings to see if the stories were true. Dr. Amanda Collins found herself surrounded by excited researchers who all wanted to study her daughter. She felt overwhelmed and a little scared. She had come here to learn about alien science, not to turn Katie into some kind of experiment. "Please, everyone needs to slow down," Amanda said as another group of alien scientists approached her in the cafeteria. "Katie is just a child. She needs time to rest and eat her lunch." But Katie was not tired at all. She was sitting at a table made for much larger beings, her feet dangling high off the floor, eating what looked like purple soup that tasted surprisingly like chicken noodle soup. She was chatting happily with a small furry alien who reminded her of her pet hamster back home. "Dr. Collins," a voice said behind Amanda. She turned around to see a tall, graceful being with blue-green skin and large silver eyes. "I am Dr. Zara Lynn from the Centaurian Cognitive Research Center. I flew here as soon as I heard about your daughter's abilities." Another researcher, Amanda, sighed. "Look, Dr. Zara Lynn, I appreciate everyone's interest, but Katie is not a laboratory subject. She's my daughter." Dr. Zara Lynn raised her long, thin hands in a peaceful gesture. "Of course, Dr. Collins. I completely understand your concerns. But what your daughter has done today could change how we understand intelligence across the galaxy. With your permission, I would like to study how her mind works. We have completely safe, non-invasive methods that would not harm her in any way." Amanda looked over at Katie, who was now showing the furry alien how to fold a napkin into the shape of a flower. The alien was trying to copy her movements, but kept getting confused with its tiny paws. "What exactly do you want to do?" Amanda asked carefully. "We have brain scanning technology that can show us how neural pathways work while someone is thinking," Dr. Zarlin explained. "It's like taking a picture of thoughts. We could watch Katie's brain while she solves puzzles and see what makes her so special." That afternoon, Katie found herself in a comfortable chair in Dr. Zarlin's laboratory. The room was filled with machines that hummed softly and displayed colorful patterns on their screens. A gentle headband that felt like silk was placed around Katie's forehead. "This won't hurt at all," Dr. Zarlin promised. "Just solve puzzles like you did this morning, and we'll watch how your brain works." Katie nodded and looked up at the new set of floating shapes that appeared above her head. These were similar to the ones from the morning, but they had different colors and moved in different ways. As Katie began solving the puzzles, Dr. Zarlin and her team watched the brain scanner displays with growing amazement. The screen showed Katie's neural activity as bright, moving patterns of light. Incredible, Dr. Zara Lynn whispered to her assistants. Look at how her brain processes spatial information. The connections are forming and dissolving at an incredible speed. What does that mean? Amanda asked, standing behind the researchers and trying to understand the colorful displays. Your daughter's brain is making new connections faster than we have ever seen before, Dr. Zarlin explained. When she looks at a complex pattern, instead of analyzing it step by step like our students do, her mind instantly creates new pathways to understand it. It's like her brain is rewiring itself in real time. On the screens, they could see Katie's thought patterns as she worked. While alien brains showed careful, logical progressions from one step to the next, Katie's brain lit up like fireworks, making connections in all directions at once. It's because she's still growing, Dr. Zarlin realized suddenly. Adult brains become fixed in their patterns, but young human brains are still forming new connections every day. She can see solutions that we cannot see because our minds have become too rigid. They brought in other human children from the delegation to test this theory. Katie's 10-year-old brother Jake could solve level 2 puzzles easily, though not as fast as Katie. A 12-year-old girl named Lisa from another family could manage level 3 puzzles with some effort, but when they tested the adult humans, including Dr. Collins herself, the results were much different. The adults struggled with even the basic level 1 puzzles, approaching them the same careful, step-by-step way that the alien students did. It appears that human neuroplasticity gives children a temporary advantage, Dr. Zarlin concluded. As humans grow older and their brains become more structured, they lose this ability to see patterns intuitively. Professor Vextera, who had been quietly observing the tests, spoke up. So you're saying that our advanced education methods actually make us worse at solving these problems? Not worse, Dr. Zarlin corrected gently. Just different. Your education teaches logical, systematic thinking, which is very valuable. But it also creates mental habits that can prevent you from seeing simple solutions to complex problems. Katie, still wearing the brain scanner headband, had finished solving a level 7 puzzle that no one had even attempted before. She looked around at all the serious alien faces staring at the computer screens. Are you done taking pictures of my brain? She asked. Because I want to go see if they have any ice cream in this place. All this thinking is making me hungry. The researchers looked at each other and started laughing. Here was a child who had just revolutionized their understanding of intelligence, and all she wanted was ice cream. Yes, little one, Dr. Zarlin said with a smile. I think we have learned enough for today. Professor Vextera sat alone in his office that evening, staring at the wall covered with his awards and certificates. 47 years of studying, teaching, and research seemed meaningless now. His greatest achievement, the puzzle matrices that had made him famous across 17 worlds, had been solved by an 8-year-old human child like they were simple games. He picked up one of his awards, a crystal pyramid that honored his work in advanced cognitive theory. The light from his desk lamp made it sparkle with rainbow colors, but tonight it just looked like an expensive paperweight. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called, setting the award back on its shelf. Katie peeked her head around the door. Her mother was behind her, looking apologetic. I'm sorry to bother you, Professor, Amanda said. Katie insisted on coming to see you. She was worried about you. Worried about me? Professor Vextera asked, surprised. Why would you be worried, little one? Katie stepped into the office and looked around at all the certificates and awards on the walls. You looked really sad after I did the puzzles today. My mom gets that same look sometimes when she can't figure out something at work. The professor's compound eyes focused on Katie's face. In all his years of dealing with students and colleagues, no one had ever noticed when he was upset, let alone cared enough to check on him. I am not sad exactly, he said slowly. I am confused. For my entire life, I believe that intelligence came from years of study and careful training. I built my career on teaching complex methods for solving difficult problems. But you showed me today that all my complicated theories might be wrong. Katie climbed up into one of the big chairs in front of his desk. Her feet did not touch the floor, and she had to hold on to the armrest to keep from sliding off. Maybe your theories aren't wrong, she said thoughtfully. Maybe they're just different. Like how my mom uses a calculator to do math, but I can count on my fingers. We both get the right answer, but we do it different ways. Professor Vextera leaned back in his chair. The simple wisdom in her words hit him like a bolt of lightning. Different ways, he repeated quietly. Yes, perhaps that is exactly right. He stood up and walked to his computer terminal. With quick movements of his four hands, he pulled up the data from that day's experiments. Charts and graphs filled the screen, showing brain activity patterns and puzzle solution times. Look at this, he said, pointing to the display. When our advanced students solve Level 1 puzzles, their brains follow very specific patterns. Each step builds on the previous step in a logical sequence. It takes time, but it is reliable and repeatable. Katie slid down from her chair and walked over to look at the screen. The patterns looked like colorful squiggly lines to her, but she nodded politely. But when you solve the same puzzles, the professor continued, switching to recordings of Katie's brain activity, your mind creates entirely new pathways. You find shortcuts that we never even knew existed. Amanda joined them at the computer. So, Katie's not necessarily smarter than your students. She just thinks differently. Precisely. Professor Vextera's eyes lit up with excitement. Our education system trains minds to be precise and methodical. This is very useful for many things. We can solve complex problems reliably, teach others our methods, and build on previous knowledge. He paused and looked at Katie, who was drawing pictures on a foggy screen with her finger. But this systematic approach also creates limitations, he continued. We become so focused on the proper way to solve problems that we cannot see other possibilities. Our minds develop what you might call mental habits. Like how I always brush my teeth the same way every morning? Katie asked, still drawing on the screen. Exactly like that, the professor said, smiling for the first time that day. Your mind has not yet developed these rigid habits. You can see solutions that are invisible to us because we have trained ourselves not to look for them. Amanda was beginning to understand. So the fact that Katie hasn't had advanced education is actually an advantage in this case? Yes, but only temporarily, Professor Vextera explained. As human children grow older and receive more formal education, they will develop the same systematic thinking patterns that we have. They will gain the ability to solve complex problems through careful analysis, but they will lose the ability to see these intuitive solutions. Katie had finished her finger drawing and was now spinning slowly in Professor's desk chair. So I won't be able to do the pretty light puzzles when I'm older? Professor Vextera thought about this carefully. You may still be able to solve them, but it will become harder as your mind learns more structured ways of thinking. Unless... He stopped mid-sentence, struck by a sudden idea. His four hands began typing rapidly on his computer keyboard, pulling up research files and educational theories. Unless what? Amanda asked. Unless we find a way to preserve this natural ability while still providing education, the professor said, his excitement growing. What if we could teach knowledge without destroying intuitive thinking? What if we could combine the best of both approaches? Katie stopped spinning in the chair and looked at him with bright, curious eyes. You mean I could keep solving the puzzles and still learn regular school stuff? Perhaps, Professor Vextera said. But first, I need to completely rethink everything I know about education and intelligence. Your mind has shown me that there are other ways to understand the universe, Katie. Ways that we have forgotten how to see. He looked around his office at all his awards and certificates with new eyes. They were not meaningless, after all. They represented one valuable way of thinking. But now he knew there were other ways, too, and maybe the best approach was to learn from all of them. 3 months later, the Zephyrian Institute looked very different. The halls that once echoed with serious academic discussions now filled with laughter and excited chatter. Students from dozens of different worlds were trying new ways of learning that no one had ever imagined before. Professor Vextera stood in his newly redesigned classroom, watching a group of young alien students work together on a puzzle. Instead of sitting at desks with their heads buried in textbooks, they were lying on the floor, standing on chairs, and even hanging upside down from specially installed bars on the ceiling. Remember, he called out to them, there is no wrong way to look at the problem. Try to see it from every angle, literally and mentally. A small reptilian student named Zisk suddenly jumped up from where he had been crawling under a table. Professor, I think I see it now. The pattern looks like my grandmother's garden when I view it from underneath. Professor Vexteros smiled, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. Excellent. Zisk, show us what you discovered. Dr. Amanda Collins entered the classroom carrying a tablet full of research notes. She had decided to extend her stay at the Institute to study this revolutionary new teaching method. What she found was even more interesting than she had expected. How are they doing today? She asked Professor Vexteros quietly. Better than I ever dreamed possible, he replied. Young Zisk just solved a level 3 puzzle using what he calls underground thinking. His approach is completely different from anything in our textbooks, but it works perfectly. In the corner of the room, Katie was sitting cross-legged on a cushion, surrounded by a group of older alien students. She was not solving puzzles herself today. Instead, she was teaching them how to stop thinking so hard. The trick is to not try so hard to be smart, Katie explained to a tall, thin student with purple skin. When you look at the puzzle, don't think about all the math stuff. Just pretend it's a picture that got all mixed up, and you're trying to put it back together. The purple student, whose name was Relvox, had been struggling with basic puzzles for weeks. But as he listened to Katie's simple advice, something clicked in his mind. He stopped trying to calculate angles and dimensions, and instead just looked at the floating shapes as if they were pieces of a broken toy. Suddenly, he could see the pattern clearly. His hands moved without conscious thought, arranging the shapes into a beautiful spiral that sparkled with music. When he finished, he stared at his work in amazement. I did it, he whispered. I actually did it. But how? You stopped getting in your own way, Katie said with a big smile. Sometimes grown-ups know so much stuff that they forget how to just look at things. Dr. Zara Lynn appeared in the doorway, carrying a thick folder of research papers. She had been documenting everything that happened at the Institute, and her findings were already changing education policies across the galaxy. Professor Vexteros, she called out, the Council of Academic Sciences wants to implement your new teaching methods on 12 more worlds. They're calling it the Human Perspective Protocol. Professor Vexteros felt a warm glow of satisfaction, but also a touch of sadness. The Human Perspective Protocol, he repeated. I suppose that is fitting, though I think Katie deserves most of the credit. Katie overheard this and looked up from her teaching circle. Can we call it something else? Human perspective sounds too fancy. How about the look at things different way method? The adults in the room laughed, but Professor Vexteros nodded seriously. I think that name captures the essence much better than any academic terminology. As the weeks passed, word of the new teaching methods spread throughout the galaxy. Universities that had been stuck solving the same problems for centuries suddenly found new solutions. Scientists who had been working on research projects for decades discovered breakthroughs by approaching their work with fresh eyes. The most remarkable change was in the students themselves. Young aliens who had been struggling in traditional classes began to excel when they were encouraged to think creatively. They started working together more, sharing different perspectives instead of competing to prove who was smartest. Katie became an unofficial ambassador, traveling to other institutes to share her simple wisdom. She never talked about complex theories or advanced mathematics. Instead, she taught alien children how to play, how to look at problems like games, and how to trust their instincts. The hardest part, Katie told a group of young Centaurian students during one of her visits, is remembering that there's no such thing as a stupid idea. Even if your answer seems silly, it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Professor Vexteros often accompanied Katie on these trips, not as her teacher, but as her student. Each time he watched her work with struggling students, he learned something new about the power of simplicity and openness. One evening, as they sat together on a transport ship traveling between worlds, Katie asked him a question that would change his thinking once again. Professor, do you think there are other things that kids can do better than grown-ups? Not just puzzles, but other important stuff? He looked out the window at the stars rushing past and thought about all the problems in the galaxy that brilliant adult minds have been unable to solve. Wars, diseases, environmental destruction, social inequality. Maybe what the galaxy needed was not more complex solutions, but simpler ones that only fresh, uncomplicated minds could see. "I think you may be right, Katie," he said softly. "I think you may be very right indeed." As their ship carried them toward their next destination, Professor Vextera began planning a new kind of research project, one that would ask children from every species to look at the galaxy's biggest problems with their unique, unencumbered perspectives. After all, if an 8-year-old human girl could revolutionize mathematics, what other miracles might be possible?